You know, it's kind of crazy to think about the fact that we've finally moved into a new era of Nintendo. But we've been on the home console era of Pokemon for at least 8 years now. And Shinx has been there for 90% of it. Oh my goodness. Can we get a round of applause for the GOAT, the God, the one to do it all? I'm so happy that my absolute GOAT cannot be stopped, cannot be shunned, cannot be detained, and has made his way into almost every single mainline title on the Switch era. And guess what? He's coming for Legend ZA next. You better watch your back. I think that might be like my third or fourth Shinx joke in the big 2025. We might need to step it up. But regardless, what's good, y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. At the time of this recording, we are nearing the end of June, which means we've almost had the Switch 2 for about 1 month, which means that we have officially had the update, the major update to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for damn near a month now. Now, I was not hiding the fact that I was definitely lollygagging a little bit because I was kind of just enjoying my first initial week with the Switch 2. I wanted to enjoy my time with Mario Kart World, a brand new Mario Kart after a decade. I wanted to see the power output and how much of a difference it really made to play Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch 2. Suffice to say, they did a pretty damn good job of delivering a console that was much stronger than their previous one. But I still believe that one of the most interesting things about all of this is the fact that they went out of their way to update these games so that they could look and play smoother and better on this new console. I've now heard this argument for a couple of weeks now of people talking about the fact that it's ridiculous that some people would go out of their way to pay $450+ to get an update on a game, but I like to think of it the other way around. They had absolutely zero reason to go out of their way to put out updates for games like ARMS, which people haven't touched in ages, Splatoon 3, which has already had its final Splatfest, and they're probably working on the next major Splatoon game that isn't even a spin-off as we speak. They had no reason to touch up on Link's Awakening of all games when they could have just touched up Echoes of Wisdom and called it a day. They went out of their way to do that. But most prominently, and the one they made the biggest deal about, which, you know, fair, was Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. You gotta keep in mind, we are less than 4 months out from the next major Pokemon game that has a Switch 2 upgrade ready to go day one. They did not need to go out of their way to put out this major update for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. For the record, this isn't me applauding them or anything for putting out an update that makes the game playable. It should have been in a much better playable state years ago, but the fact that they went out of their way to do it at all kind of speaks volumes, right? They went out of their way to touch and fix this game up so that it was in a better playable state, so that when we did inevitably get our Switch 2s, we would have something else to look forward to. Specifically, people who didn't really want to give this game a chance because it was such a struggle to run before. The amount of people that I know personally that haven't finished Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because of the state that it was in beforehand is egregious. A lot of them didn't even bother going out of their way to finish the game because it was just so miserable to play. And if we're being so completely honest, I'm not even sure where I would be at this point in time if I wasn't a PokeTuber at the time. I mean, there's a very good chance I still would have finished the game, but I definitely probably wouldn't have given it nearly as much of a fair shake if it didn't feel mandatory for me to play through the game, you know? This game was not without its many issues. However, I still found a way to love these games for what they were and what they wanted to be. I've brought this up many times and I'll bring it up many more, but I am a sucker for potential. I'm also usually one to give the benefit of the doubt to developers, especially to Game Freak, who doesn't usually have enough time to actually genuinely realize their vision the way they usually want to. Maybe it's because I'm a Sonic fan too, but I don't know. Regardless, through the many cracks and rough patches, I saw a vision that they tried as much as they could within the time allotted to realize, and I had as much fun with that vision as I possibly could, and I ended up coming out on the other side having a pretty damn good time. Which is why we're here today, actually. With my most recent playthrough of Pokemon Scarlet alongside the DLCs, I wanted to see what feelings of mine still hold up. Now that the game actually functions the way that it was intended, it's a lot easier to see this game's positive attributes. However, in that same vein, its flaws are a lot more glaring. Especially for me, because this is like my third or fourth playthrough of these games at this point. So, welcome to my revisited review. This is not going to be nearly as long as my original review because, again, we have spent almost 3 full years tearing this game a new one. Hence why I'm going to keep it as simple as humanly possible. We are going to do something a little differently and start with the negatives first. Because after that, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about why I still enjoy these games for what they are. And then, of course, we also have to talk about the DLCs because now that I've played everything in succession, that plays a much bigger role this time around. So, I apologize for the 5 minutes of full exposition. That seems a little unnecessary because I don't even know how long this video is gonna be, but I feel like I just kind of had to get a lot of that out. But with that all being said, go ahead, sit down, grab a snack, like a good snack, because I don't know, we may be here for a little while, and get cozy. And why don't we talk about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and if it holds up 3 years later, or whatever I happen to title this video. I don't really know yet. Now that the game functions, it's time that we truly acknowledge all of this game's real, genuine issues. Again, a lot of this stuff I have touched on before, but let's get a lot more in depth this time around. First and foremost, these games are still horrifyingly ugly. I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million more. The models for the people and the Pokemon look totally fine. They have an animated, cartoony style that's very fitting for this world. The problem is, the world in of itself is extremely ugly. There is absolutely zero consistency when it comes to the world design, and that's what gets me. The moment you're not in like a fun grassy plain, every single detail of any mountains, any sands, any trees, they all start to like blend together, and the moment you get too far away, it looks like clay put together into a castle or something by a 5-year-old. Nothing looks coherent whatsoever. Now, of course, this isn't the first time that we've had this problem for the modern era of Pokemon. Just 1 generation ago with Pokemon Sword and Shield, we had a very similar problem with any of the open zones. We were all very much fully aware that we were working with weaker hardware, so we weren't expecting Generation 8 to be the absolute most beautiful thing that we've ever seen in all time or anything like that. But when you look at any of the open areas and compare it to literally any of the other major open world titles that are on the Switch, it was very hard to ignore how bad it looked. Here's my thing though. It was a lot more bearable and easier to swallow with Generation 8 because not all of our time was spent in the open areas, at least not during our main playthroughs. We were in cities that were contained and they were able to detail and flesh out a little more properly. Every single town or city that you would enter had some form of cohesion and some form of design that actually was very fitting for the area that it was in, and things blended together in a very smart and clear way. When you remove the wild areas, Pokemon Sword and Shield actually look insanely pretty. But of course, I imagine it's much easier to design a town that blends together with the world in a very contained space when it's like that. The problem with Scarlet and Violet is that we don't have that escape. Everything is blended together because this is an open world game. Maybe Game Freak hasn't had enough time to practice that situation? I don't know. They've never really had too much of an issue with designing worlds beforehand, but again, that was before everything had to be one cohesive world, right? So, yeah, I don't know what happened there, but it very clearly did not work in their favor. I'm sure a lot of you could agree, but it's kind of hard to ignore when every single background, the moment something gets a little too far away, it looks like mud and dirt just kind of scraped together to look like something for the sake of looking like something. I don't know, there's just something so funny about the fact that these big grassy plains just so like unnaturally blend into like a sandy area or something like that. There's just no form of cohesion, and it's just a tad frustrating sometimes, but I guess that's kind of how it goes. But speaking of towns and cities and the backgrounds not really looking all that good when they're too far away, being in them isn't really all that much better. While things definitely look a little bit better up close than from a distance, it doesn't really help when there's not really much going on design-wise inside of any of these cities or towns. On their own, it feels like each individual place doesn't really serve all that much of a purpose outside of being a setting for important areas like gyms or shops or something along those lines. Like I've said before, it's even worse when you compare it to previous generations. Again, grabbing from just Generation 8, we had towns and cities that felt like they had some form of history, their own unique stories to tell, and designs that were a little more inspired. I don't know, maybe it's because there is a little bit of a lack in overworld art style that it feels like a lot of these places don't really convey the feelings and ideas that they're supposed to, because they do have different aspects to them, they just don't really stand out very much. And of course, the fact that we can't go in the buildings also doesn't really help the fact, because it makes even less of a reason for us to come back to any of these places, and makes them a lot less memorable because all we're seeing and remembering is menus. No longer do we have unique restaurants or cafes or museums to enter, it is simply just menus upon menus upon menus. I understand that they did their best to make it so that for lore purposes, most things are available to us outside, like Pokemon centers, and literally right next to that, they have a place to park your Salazar or whatever, but at the same time, it just kind of loses any form of uniqueness when it's like that. Now, every single one of these Pokemon centers don't really have much going on because they're all outside, and maybe there's a trainer or two talking, but 9 times out of 10, we can't even really talk to them. Things like Pokemon centers and Pokemarts and things along those lines were made to be pit stops instead of rest centers, and that, I feel, is one of the most detrimental parts of the game, because that philosophy ends up applying to pretty much every other shop or store in the game. I do see that the general idea here was to get people in and out as quickly as possible as to not interrupt their flow when going in and out of towns to capture Pokemon or do whatever they're doing. I understand. I just don't think that we needed to sacrifice design and personality to any of these towns or cities or the people living in them for the sake of that. That didn't really need to happen. And so because of that, on my 3rd playthrough now, going through these towns feels unfortunate, because I already know good and well that they don't really have all that much to offer in terms of uniqueness. There is one town that is completely devoid of any gyms or challenges of any kind, and the only reason for it existing is for the NPC that resides there that is holding onto the armor piece for you to get either Armor Rouge or Cerulege. That is it. It's like, why even design a full town for that? You could have designed something much more interesting there, but alright, if you say so, I guess. It's just a little unfortunate that a lot of these areas, towns, or cities alike don't really have much going on for them, and that's really unfortunate in the case of an open world game, because the entire point is to be able to explore stuff like this freely and be able to enjoy yourself and immerse yourself, but it's kind of hard to do that when the immersion factor isn't really there for any of these towns or cities. Simple as that. And you can feel free to argue with me on that one, but I went out of my way in this most recent playthrough to explore these cities much more thoroughly than I ever did in my first 2 original playthroughs. Long and short, I was less impressed this time than I was beforehand. In a very similar vein, one problem that I've had consistently with this game was the fact that the school, which was one of the main selling points of this game, was one of the most underutilized aspects of it. In previous generations, the school would not be prominent whatsoever. Maybe you'd fight a couple of beginner trainers, maybe you'd give your rival the town map or whatever, and that would be pretty much the full extent of any school within the entire region. Which is why during the promotion era, I thought that it was really neat that there was going to be a lot more stuff revolving around you being a student. I thought that that was a really great idea. But lo and behold, the moment you're released from the school, you almost never need to really go back there unless you really want to take extra classes to learn more about the game in of itself. And for somebody like me and you, people who have grown up with Pokemon as a franchise, we don't really have a need for all of these excessive tutorials. Yeah, sure, the teacher designs are pretty good and the classes themselves are pretty cute because it's just kind of fun little tidbits about history on Paldea and learning about different cries from Pokemon and stuff. But it's like, once you've done it once, you've pretty much good and well got your fill of anything that this school can provide for you, and you don't really have any reason to go back until the game forces you physically to go back at the end of the game. But I guess that's just from a replayability aspect. When you go into the game blind for the first time, if you know Pokemon well enough, you will never need any of these classes. Like, yeah, sure, when you do all of the classes in succession, you could get a couple of prizes here and there, but it's nothing all that insane. What, a couple of candies? You could get plenty of those out in the overworld by doing raids all on your own. You don't really need that. And another frustrating aspect about the school is the fact that you can quote unquote bond with the teachers, but that doesn't really provide anything for you. Like, it'd be one thing if that could guide us into a cool little event involving that teacher and maybe we could go on a little side quest with them or something like that, but no. We just kind of learn about their personalities and what they're trying to do here and, you know, what kind of a person that they are, which in of itself, you know, is fun and neat and cute. I'd love to learn more about these characters, especially since their designs are outrageously good on a lot of them, but for the most part, it doesn't really provide anything worth pursuing. Like, in a weird roundabout way, it's just short enough to not be like invasive, but to also not give enough context and like build up or development to any of these characters and their lives. So you just kind of do it for the sake of doing it, and it's not really all that worth it. I'm not saying that we need persona levels of developments when it comes to these teachers and things like that, but I definitely feel like we could at least take a couple of notes out of that book. You know what I'm saying? On top of that, there's the fact that we have our own dedicated dorm room that we can't do literally anything with. There is zero reason for you to ever visit your dorm room. You can't decorate it, you can't invite people over that you get to know throughout the course of the game so that you could get to know them on a deeper level. You can't talk to your teachers there, you can't do homework to maybe get some kind of benefit out of that for the overworld, you can't accept side quests or cook or do anything in that room. There is nothing for you there. You can't even get changed in there, you still do it from your menu. And of course, again, that's twice as infuriating when you visit all of your friends' rooms and you see how unique and decorated they are, and you can't do anything like that. That is insane to me. So yeah, on this most recent playthrough, I didn't do as much as the school as I would have liked because I just felt like I was kind of wasting my time because there was really nothing to garner from it. Getting more into the gameplay aspects here, I think we should go ahead and start with the fact that customization not being a thing is easily one of the most frustrating aspects about Scarlet and Violet as a whole. And again, I'm not even just talking about the clothes or designing your character. The fact that you can't really actually make any choices that make any form of a difference for the story is kind of what gets me, because why don't we ever take a route like that? Why are we so scared to do something like that? In terms of genuine design for the clothing aspect, you get 4 options for a majority of the game. Until you get the DLC, you can only dress up in different seasonal outfits. And I would totally understand something like that if we spent a lot more time at the school, but that is absolutely not the case whatsoever. So why am I forced to wear the school outfit 90% of my journey outside of the school? And at the very least, why can I not modify my fit like Arvin, Susie, or Penny did? Why am I completely limited to sets? That is extremely lame. Like what? It was too hard to make it so that I could wear a sweater with the school emblem on it? Like, really? That's just infuriating. Especially coming hot off the heels of Generation 8, where we had some of the best customization the series had ever seen. It also doesn't help that I'm a black dude, so playing as a black dude and only having one real haircut to use, it's just so immersion breaking when I go online again and see every single other guy that looks like me using the exact same fit, hairstyle, and setup. It's just so lame, you know? It could just be very frustrating. Even with all of the DLC outfits, we still barely have much of a choice in terms of what we're able to wear outside of like shoes and socks and beanies and hats and things like that. We can't even wear armbands or anything like that. We just have to choose out of what they give us, and that is simply that. How tragic. Moving on. Moving even more into the gameplay aspect, not utilizing level scaling in this was the biggest mistake they ever could have made. I'll say it like this. I accidentally went out of order a little bit because of my Pokemon being a little bit more over leveled than I was used to, and I was at a point where some of them weren't listening to me and things like that because I was a little bit higher of a level. I ended up running into a Team Star base and thinking, why am I getting my ass kicked and why are my Pokemon still struggling to listen to me so bad? I played the Team Star bases out of order. But here's the thing. Why does there need to be any form of order for something like the Team Star bases. The entire point of an open world game like this one, by concept, is for you to go around, explore, do what you want to do, see something in the distance, go to it, and if you feel like you want to interact with that event, you can interact with that event. I don't think you should be punished for not visiting one that was like 3 miles away back east. It's also very awkward to go back and forth between like the primary starting area and like to either the left or the right, because you're going to be severely overleveled by the time you actually start going to the other side, and so everything's going to be a cakewalk for a good while. You know, it's super strange to do that. I just feel like a lot of these situations could have been remedied by simply having level scaling so that when I make my way around back to the starting town, I'm good, and I could just go challenge the Elite Four or whatever I'm doing there, because it makes a lot more sense for things to flow better that way. Thankfully, they couldn't avoid level scaling in the DLC, so at least they did that. It's just very strange that they didn't do it at all in the base game, where we're advertised to go wherever the hell we want, when in reality, we are severely punished for it. So that's something. I'm not gonna harp too long on this because I feel like I've talked about this so much that I don't even want to bring it up in an official review again, but at the same time, it is still jarring and baffling to me that this game was completely lacking in terms of side quests. Like, the quote-unquote side quests are pretty much hidden amongst the school by doing classes and talking to a couple of people here and there, and maybe giving them like an item or something that you probably already have on hand, but it's nothing like major, like going out of your way to find a certain Pokemon for somebody or battling a certain Pokemon for whatever reason to help somebody out or whatever, or saving somebody in the overworld from a rampaging Pokemon. We don't get anything like that in this open world game that's also an RPG. We don't have that. Instead, we just don't have any side quests, and that is by and far one of the most baffling design choices to me, especially in an open world game where the entire point is to get your player to explore and immerse themselves as much as humanly possible in that world. And one of the best ways to do that is by introducing NPCs and characters that can help guide you through it by sending you to do certain tasks. I just simply don't see a reason as to why side quests, or at least real side quests like other RPGs have, aren't present yet in Pokemon, not even in its first open world entry. That is just bizarre to me. And I guess it didn't really help considering the fact that we were coming hot off the heels of Pokemon Legends Arceus, which did finally introduce side quests. So it was like very, very weird to come back to an open world game and not have that at all. I don't know, maybe they've changed their tune. Pokemon Legends EA is most likely going to have something like that, thankfully, so we can only hope Generation 10 going forward does have that, but it is still by and far the weirdest thing that they've done. Or, I guess, in this specific case, didn't do. I guess the situation kind of directly ties in with the school, because there could have been so many aspects in which we could have utilized all of these characters that we met to give them side quests and things like that to develop their characters more. We just didn't take advantage of that, and that really, really sucks. Now, my last gripe here kind of feels a little more minute now that we've seen the problem kind of remedied in Pokemon Legends ZA, but it's still kind of a problem in this game, in which trainers are kind of pointless still. I almost forgot that you usually find yourself doing so much catching and raid battling that because trainers don't like scout you out from a mile away and try to battle you, you can so easily avoid them, especially because they are placed in the most weirdest hidden spots you could ever find. I did try to make it a point in this most recent playthrough to find as many trainers as I possibly could, and I definitely battled a lot more trainers in this playthrough than I ever have beforehand, but there definitely was a point where I was just like, I don't really need to battle more trainers, let me just do a couple of raids, get my level up, and then we'll move on from there. And that's kind of unfortunate because, again, like I've always said, trainers are meant to be something of a skill check, something to make sure that you are prepared for what's coming next. If you lose to them or you struggle very heavily with them, you'll know that the next major challenge or event that's coming up ahead is probably going to slam you if you're not careful, so you're going to go back out and train up some more. The problem here is that you can see exactly what you might be dealing with based on the levels of the Pokemon in the area, and then instead of battling trainers to level up, you just go do a couple of raids because they just keep popping up essentially non-stop. Of course, you could go out of your way to find the trainers and you could get rewarded from the guys standing at the Pokemon centers, but I mean, again, they're so hidden and tucked away that there's a lot of the times where I felt like it just wasn't worth it to go out of my way to hunt for them. I bring this up because trainers were just a really unfortunate situation this time around, especially because they are easily one of the most important aspects about the Pokemon franchise. Without trainers, you don't have Pokemon, so it's just kind of strange that they didn't put more emphasis on making trainers feel a little bit more important. Again, though, this feels a little bit more minute because I have to imagine that with the footage that we've seen from Pokemon Legends EA of how trainers operate and how they work, we can definitely see a future in which they utilize something similar to make trainers feel a little bit more threatening and a lot more mandatory. It just kind of sucks that in this testing ground for open world, trainers didn't really work the way that they were supposed to this time around. Now that does it for all of my major gripes, and like I said in my previous video, one new thing that kind of came about that was a little annoying this time around was that the fact that there's more Pokemon popping up on the screen and that there's like a wider spawn rate makes it a little annoying to run into Pokemon now, because you can get like kind of like soft locked into battling back to back and trapped in an area, and it's a little irritating sometimes, and you can't really do anything about the spawn rate now. So there's just going to be a lot of Pokemon in your way half the time, and sometimes you won't even see them because they're so tiny. But I guess that's just kind of an unfortunate drawback for being able to see more Pokemon, because it was a lot easier for me to spot shinies this time around, so that's kind of funny. But other than that, that just about does it for my gripes. If you've been on this channel long enough, you can very clearly see that a lot of what I said is not necessarily anything new. This game still has the exact same problems that it did when it wasn't a functioning game. It just lacked a little bit of time in the oven to be able to flesh out all of the very clear ideas that these developers wanted to bring to the table. I have to believe that that very quiet year of 2024 was because these developers and these higher ups learned from what happened with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and they noticed a lot of these problems and decided to go out of their way to remedy that by actually giving these developers a little bit more time to cook. And we've definitely talked a lot about that, but right now I think we should go ahead and flip the coin and talk about the things that I do enjoy about these games. For one thing, the general atmosphere and music. Despite the game not being the prettiest thing to look at, it is very easy for me to get into a flow every time I hop into these games when I started over. I found myself just kind of losing myself and just going around, catching Pokemon, battling whoever I could, doing raid battles, and so on and so forth, because the atmosphere is actually pretty decent, especially because the music is really good. I still enjoy running around these big open grassy fields and seeing what Pokemon are available for me to catch every time I enter a new area. It's so nice to be able to just kind of vibe out and do whatever I'm doing. During this most recent playthrough, it was nice to be able to just know what was coming and be able to just vibe out, turn on a favorite YouTuber or streamer or even some music while I was just doing whatever I needed to do while I was recording. Even on my third playthrough, I still caught that feeling constantly of, ooh, what's over there? What's that? Maybe I should head over there next, or maybe I could head back this way. Maybe I could plot out my route like this, and I just kind of mindlessly ended up doing that, getting stronger in the process. But now, even more so, because the game runs at a stable frame rate and has faster loading, so things were a lot more seamless, way better than they were before, and that is truly astounding. For the first half of the game, you could definitely see in the gameplay that I really was just kind of kicking back and playing the game like I did for the first time, just enjoying myself, going around catching every single Pokemon in the vicinity, and just genuinely having a good time. Whenever I would turn the game off, I would find myself wanting to come back to just chill out. That was my chill time. And, you know, even if some designs were a little underdeveloped in terms of towns or cities, it was nice to just go back to the academy every now and again and just kind of vibe out, look at the designs and read some of the books that were there and get a better understanding of the world around me by, you know, just looking at all the information that was present there. It was nice and pretty damn relaxing, I have to admit. Kind of reminded me that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet at some point was something of a cozy game for me, because it was just the time that I would just record and just kick back and do whatever I needed to do. It was nice to just kind of turn my brain off for a while and just battle, just be. It was nice. On top of that though, I definitely have to give appreciation to the general scope of what it wanted to do. I definitely enjoyed this story a lot, and maybe it was because it came off the heels of Pokemon Sword and Shield, which didn't have any form of story whatsoever, but it was nice to have something so unique for what it was trying to do. It's still a trip to me that Pokemon Sword and Shield had no story, this one had 3 separate storylines. Although, I will still admit, the gym storyline is by and far still very much the weakest. And obviously this stems from the fact that both Penny and Arven got a lot of development throughout their routes, while Nimona didn't really get anything in that caliber. Her story was simply molding you to be her perfect rival, and she did precisely that. Meanwhile, Arven is dealing with missing/dead parents and a half-dead dog that he's trying to revive, and Penny is cleaning up the mistake that almost cost the school its entire reputation. That's some pretty heavy stuff in comparison to whatever Nimona had going on. And then of course, Area Zero in of itself is a very sick concept, and we had a villain that wasn't necessarily a villain, but something that needed to be stopped regardless, which, you know, again, I still think we could have utilized the real villain, and I feel like we were lacking that, but for the story that they were trying to provide, I feel like it worked very well for what it was. I mean, hey, the end fight felt cool, satisfying, and had a banger theme, so can't get mad at that whatsoever. Of course, I have to give acknowledgement to the creativity aspect. For one thing, terrestrialization easily being a top 3 in terms of gimmicks. Type changes to either help improve your battle or to throw your opponents off is just a major strategic advantage, and it is so flexible that it could literally work anywhere. I could see this being just as used as Mega Evolution down the line, and that makes me really excited because this is a really solid mechanic. And in turn, of course, how they developed the region and the history of terrestrialization is actually pretty damn fascinating. I did go back and do some of the history classes, and it is pretty damn unique. I have to give them that. This is probably some of the most lore that we've gotten on a region in a very long time. But as I stated right from the get-go, one of the most important things to come out of this game for me was the potential. For essentially the last decade, we have seen major franchises take their first step into major turning points very often now. Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. All of these games were major turning points for each respective franchise because we've thought about each of those respective franchises for one way for so long that it limited our vision in how they could evolve. In the case of Pokemon, we were always inching toward open world. That was kind of a guarantee the moment we went 3D. There was no doubt about that. We just weren't sure at the time exactly how they would go about it, and now we see something of a vision with that with Scarlet and Violet. Now don't get it twisted, I'm very much aware that there was a lot, and I mean a lot, bucketfuls of missed potential when it comes to these games. But at the same time, this was a brand new starting point for the franchise. And maybe it wasn't the greatest starting point. Okay, fair enough, I'm not gonna argue with you on that. But that just means that the potential for improvement is so ripe that it's insane. Now that we've seen the baseline of what we can do in an open world Pokemon game, we can see how it can improve. Maybe they can get crazier down the line with movement. Down the line they can get crazier with how we enter battles and how we battle trainers and how we enter gyms and how we do challenges in the overworld and how we play with friends. I can absolutely see a future in which they make a lot more eventful things happen in the overworld for multiple people at one time to interact with, and that's gonna be insanely exciting. We've seen that stories and characters can go even deeper than we ever possibly imagined. I always look back at Arven's storyline and think, wow, they went kinda dark for his route. That's absolutely insane. And in turn, it just kind of makes me excited for what kind of characters we're going to meet in the future, what their stories are going to be like, what the region's story is going to be like, what kind of enemies we're going to be up against. I'm looking forward to it. And of course, I feel like customization can only really go up from this point on, right? Down the road, I can only imagine that we're probably going to have a lot better customization options to design these characters in a way that actually envisions us the way that we want to enjoy these games. And of course, I'm not just talking about clothing and accessories. I am talking about decisions that matter, making our own choices and making our own adventure, our own stories. The long and short of it is, they definitely had a very rough start, but I have no doubt in my mind that they can absolutely improve. You could go ahead and you can call me ignorant, that's not insane to say. However, with the recent year that they took off and what Pokemon Legends ZA looks like that we're getting in a couple of months from now, I don't know. I think it's fair to be a little more confident in things. Now, before we completely wrap things up here, we do need to mention the DLC. Thank Shanks, that major update did not only apply to the base game, but the DLCs as well, which means that they were a lot better functioning and a lot easier to go through. And also, for the most part, I feel like the DLCs did a pretty good job in adding on to what the base game delivered. For one thing, the Teal Mask actually had level scaling to my understanding. Unfortunately, I forgot about this, so I didn't end up purchasing the Scarlet version of the DLC until after my playthrough of the base game. Regardless though, that just means that part 1 can be enjoyed at any time. Kitakami was very solid, especially because now it runs at a very clean frame rate, so it was a lot more enjoyable. The Ogre Ousted minigame still kinda sucks ass, I can't lie, but at the very least, the mandatory playthrough that you have to do to get to the next segment of the story is a lot more bearable because the game actually functions now, so it doesn't really matter as much. And when I say sucks ass, I just mean that there's generally not really all that much going on, but for the most part, it's easy enough to get through because it's so simple, so there's really just not that much to it is all I'm getting at. Overall though, the Teal Mask was a delight to go through, and I feel the exact same way about part 2 of the DLC with the Indigo Disc. Now, I'll be completely honest here, I don't really feel like it's necessary for me to delve into like all of my feelings about the story and stuff like that because I already did that. For the most part, my feelings are generally pretty much the same when it comes to the plot. But like I said earlier, now that we have a better functioning version of these DLCs, it was a lot easier to see what they actually brought to the table. For example, the challenge. And I'm not even referring as much to part 1 as I am part 2 very specifically in this instance. I completely forgot that part 2 of the DLC was ruthless when it came to these like BB League leaders and the types of teams and items that they were using for their battles. It was insane. I'm not gonna sit here in front with y'all. I was getting dog walked half the time during these BB League fights. It was literally a bloodbath for my poor team. Like, I had to go back out and grind a little bit and even just grab some help from Pokemon Home from previous playthroughs. But honestly, I kind of like that they made me work for that win. I kind of like that me playing super casually and not thinking too hard for a majority of the game and then them shifting up on me a little bit like that kind of made me get on my toes a little bit. And I feel like I would definitely like to see more of a gradual development with something like that in future games. I do like that it was a little bit harder, and I like the idea that all of us playing casually or whatever else had to step it up a little bit to actually get through the story. They really put the team that I built up throughout that entire playthrough to the test, and my team was not prepped properly. I'm not even gonna lie. I also forgot how pleased I was at the specific idea that they could actually make like lore relevant plot that connects to the base game, as well as have a contained story that's in separate parts. Playing through this again made me remember how pleased I was at the end of part 1 and waiting for part 2. Just seeing Kieran's development and stuff like that, it was really pleasant to see, and it makes me hopeful for future DLCs of future games to see like what relevant plot and like what important lore stuff they could bring to the table that could connect to base games from now on. And of course, overall, I really enjoyed the fact that these DLCs brought a hint of what we could look forward to when it comes to the future. I've talked about my little theory for years now, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. Maybe a lot of people disagree, I don't know. But the fact that they brought Terrestrialization specifically to Blueberry Academy, which is specifically for whatever reason in the Unova region, which is the next set of remakes that we are set to get because Gen 4 was the last set, that can't be a coincidence. They didn't do that for no reason. I don't know, it just makes me really excited to see what we could potentially look forward to, whether it be a Legends game with Unova, whether it be the remakes and we maybe get Terrestrialization as a gimmick to really shake things up. I don't know, I don't care, I'm looking forward to it. But overall, in my personal opinion, the DLCs are mostly a net positive. It just brings a lot of extra stuff and content to the base games that you can enjoy at your leisure if you feel that way. If you are feeling like the game is missing a little bit of a post game, that is possibly the best thing you could get out of it, is the fact that you just get more out of it, and it's just a good time overall. It brought the challenge, it brought the story, it brought the characters, it brought more fits, it brought more locations and more to do. And I can't really complain about that. It was a nice addition, and I had a great time with that. So, at the end of the day, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are pretty solid games. You can argue with me on that if you want, but I had a good time with it. I had a good time on this most recent playthrough, more so than ever now that the game properly functions, and it doesn't feel crazy for me to finally say that these games are solid and I had a good time with them. A great time, even. And I made sure to bring up the negative points first, just so it's very clear that I am not just shilling for these games. I'm fully aware of the flaws that are present here, and I'm fully aware that they did not reach their max potential, and that there could have been a lot more content and effort put into these games. But for what they are, for our first open world games, you could see now more than ever that there's a lot here. This game has a lot to offer, and they aren't perfect, but they're pretty damn good. So if you have the extra time, a Nintendo Switch 2 console, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet ready to go, but maybe it's not finished, hey, maybe update it and give that sucker another go, because I'm telling you right now, you're not gonna have to fight past all that sludge and glop anymore. I don't think that's the word I want to use, but you don't have to fight past nearly as many issues as you would have beforehand. My recommendation, if you have a couple of friends that haven't finished Pokemon Scarlet and Violet either, get them to play the game with you too, so that you could have raid buddies at the ready, so that when you run into a 5 or 6 star raid, you're good to go. You know what I'm saying? Overall, I'm very happy that they did go out of their way to improve on these games, because they had absolutely no reason to do that, let alone do it for free. They easily could have released Nintendo Switch 2 editions with all of the changes and upgrades that they made to the game, but honestly, it's a miracle that they didn't do that, because usually they are much greedier. But you know what? I'm not complaining. And that really does give me hope for the future. Not just for Pokemon Legends EA, but everything beyond. Generation 10, any remakes going forward, we could have a much higher quality franchise on our hands. And I'm looking forward to the day that we can really see that. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. You know what's crazy? I fully intended for this to be like a 20-something minute video. I wanted this video to be half the length that it is now. Did not mean to go over the 20-minute mark this far. This is insane, but you know what? I guess it is kind of something, like I said, a re-review of Scarlet and Violet, so I guess it was kind of inevitable that this one was going to be long, but because of this, it's probably going to take me a little bit longer to edit it. Probably, maybe, I don't know. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I'll probably put out a little filler video before this one, just so that you guys have something to eat on before I put this one out, because this one's gonna be a beast to upload. But regardless, I want to hear everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below. Have you been replaying Pokemon Scarlet and Violet since the Switch 2 update? Are you enjoying it? Do you think that they made a lot of improvements that make the game feel a lot better and look a lot better, and you feel yourself enjoying the game a lot more because it actually functions the way it was supposed to be? Or do you feel like it was too late, you don't really care about the update, nothing they could do with this game will ever change your mind, and there's really nothing else to it? Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
Doing donuts in a bin. I stay funky. Battle goes wherever I is. I stay funky. I don't know who's ready to spit. Just know you're going down with my 58 clips. I stay funky. Honey's taking back to the crib. I stay funky. Get the club popped off like pins.